This is the main window for the Stats Helper application. It's really the only thing that needs to be used during the actual race. It consists of a menu bar across the top, a toolbar which will have icons for shortcuts to the most commonly used tools, a central widget which is itself divided into three horizontal panes, and then a status bar at the bottom where messages will occasionally occur. The relative size of each of the panes within the central widget can be resized by grabbing the sizing handle between them, moving it up and down as desired. In a similar fashion, you can resize the controls within each horizontal pane by grabbing the sizing bar and moving it left or right. Note that if you make a widget or control too small to display all its underlying data, a horizontal or vertical scroll bar will appear as needed. This control of the size of each of the individual panes and widgets allows you to optimize the use of your screen regardless of the particular resolution that you're using. Let's look at the top pane first. This is the pane that that's really used the most. In fact, it's mandatory to at least review the data at the beginning of each heat to make sure it's correct. On the left-hand side, we have the current race and heat number. The EGS itself, and EGS stands for our electronic judging system, it will actually output what it thinks is the current race and heat. But unfortunately, since no one before now has ever used that information, the head table normally doesn't bother to keep it accurate. So I have an override that allows one to enter what the actual race and heat that is being run is. And that's probably going to be needed for the foreseeable future. However, there is a button that you can click that will automatically use whatever the EGS puts out instead of depending on a manual input. And next to the race and heat, you need to select what lane you're interested in. The EGS outputs data for both the left and the right lanes, but the application is intended to allow you to enter data about the dogs running in one lane or the other, not both at the same time. So it's important that you pick which set of data you're going to be interested in, with the set of data in which you're interested. The next control is a list box that has the available lineups. If you click on a particular lineup, you can see that the dogs that are on that lineup will appear along with their CRNs. You might also notice that some data is changing here at the bottom when we click a lineup. That's all the heats for that particular lineup for this tournament. We'll talk about that more in a minute. After you select a lineup, you see the dogs for that particular lineup, and they're in the expected running order as entered when you define the lineup. Start dog, dog 2, dog 3, anchor, and then a couple of bench dogs. The bench dogs are shaded in gray. You notice that let's say you want to change the run order. Let's say we want to put Jim as start dog. We just select on the dog and then decide whether to move her up or down in the lineup. If I click the up bottom, she goes the up position, or we could move her in the down position. Note that as I change the dog's lineup, the headers in this split time sections change to be consistent with the current lineup. We'll show you that more in a minute as well. And then finally, we have the jump height. It automatically calculates the jump height based on the shortest dog in the active lineup, that is the first forward dogs. So for example, if we were to take Luke out by moving him down, we would see, well, I guess both Luke and Rowdy are 8. That's a bad example. Let's make Faye our anchor dog by moving her up the lineup, and now all of a sudden, since she doesn't have a height dog record, we go up to 14 inches, which I assume that's the default jump height if you don't have a height record, but I can easily change that if it's not correct. So reviewing the top pane, the race and heat information, the lane, what your current lineup is, what the run order is. If it's changing, you need to modify it here. And then the jump height, which couldn't be overridden if the algorithm that's based on the shortest dog isn't correct. Next, let's talk about the central pane or the middle pane. After the judge, or after the dogs complete racing one heat, the judge pushes a button on his remote control that causes the data from the EGS to be transmitted. And that data consists of the split times for each of the dogs that are running, along with the team result, whether it was a win, loss, tie, or do not finish. And from that information, the title points, heat points, and start time can be calculated. When a heat completes, the judge will push the button on his remote control, and that'll cause split times and other information for the heat to be transmitted. It looks something like this. In this particular case, it looks like we had some reruns. Let me pick another heat from Palmetto Pack. We'll talk about a clean heat first. Okay, here's an example where we just had 4 dogs run. We get the split time for each dog in the active lineup, a team time. This data is output directly from the EGS, not calculated. And we get whether it was win or loss, again straight from the EGS. And then from that information, just from the actual team time, we can get the title points. And then depending on was win, loss, tie, or do not finish, and the particular tournament scoring rules, we can get the points that are to be added for this particular heat. Race points that you get for winning the most heats in the race, are added separately. We'll talk about that later too. The result will frequently be invalid if there were flags like drop balls, bobble balls. Bad passes, it'll probably be fine. The EGS is smart enough to recognize when bad passes occur and expects an extra split time to occur for each bad pass that it saw. If it doesn't see those, it'll record a DNF. But anyway, for these other flags that occur, you'll need to change these as appropriate to get the correct title point and heat point calculation. Should also add the start time is not output from the EGS. It's calculated in this case from the team times minus all the individual dog times. It can differ by 1 millisecond from what you see on the actual heat on the EGS displays. That's rounding error that can occur when doing the math to calculate it. After you review this data, you need to decide whether to keep it or ignore it. The only time I guess you ignore the data out of the heat is perhaps there was so much chaos that it just didn't make any sense. The actual numbers, the actual split times, I don't think they'll ever be inaccurate. However, there could be something that you lost track of dogs or whatever. You could choose to ignore the heat results. If you record the heat results, the data is added to the saved heat records, and the current split times are cleared. Okay, that was data for a clean heat, but how do you enter flags whenever something happened during the heat? Well, remember the actual split times aren't filled in until after the heat is done. So what will happen is during the heat itself, you can now, since you don't have to copy the actual split times down on paper, you can stay heads up and watch the heat and click on a particular dog's column whenever that dog had something happen that was of interest. For example, let's pick on Sweeney. Let's click on Sweeney, and up comes a dialog that allows me to enter what kind of flags he had. You can click on a button and it highlights it red. You can have more than one that active. You can have both a bad pass and drop a ball. Missed jump. These top ones all are flags that would require a rerun to not have a do not finish. I also have a button for bobble ball, which isn't a flag, but it's maybe of interest to not only for this dog to explain why he was slower than usual, but could also be a mitigating factor for why the dog that's passing him was slower than usual. Any of these flags can be used at analysis time to exclude records from the statistics if you want. And then I added something here that I've always thought would be interesting is an easy flag. An easy would be, let's say during the middle of the heat, the opposing flag had the opposing team had a flag, and you're really running this race to more to actually win the tournament placement as opposed to just getting title points. And then the smart thing to do is to pass just as pass very wide to be very conservative to assure that you win that heat. And therefore you might want to exclude records for not only this dog but all the following dogs on this particular heat from the statistical analysis. And then finally, if the EGS time is invalid for whatever reason, you can do a manual override and put it in here. Again, I don't think that's ever going to happen, but I put it in here so we'd have it. And let's say we'll give Sweeney a drop ball and close the dialog. And notice that this highlights red. We can come back and change our mind at any time and say, whoops, that was really on Jim. Jim really had the bad pass or whatever it was. And then what happens, just as before, when the heat completes, the judge will push his button and the times will populate. Now this particular heat didn't have any extra times, so if there was a flag, no one reran because the EGS would have put out a time for it. And therefore the default, the header for the dog in the rerun position was cleared. I guess I didn't mention that when you click on a particular, let's record these heats, this heat, and let's enter another flag and say Xena had a drop ball. And what I wanted to mention is Xena's all set up and ready to go as the first rerun dog. As you saw, if she doesn't really rerun, she won't get a time. EGS won't see a time, so it'll just be cleared. If you have a second dog that had a flag, then that becomes it becomes the default dog for the second rerun position. And I just added 2. I'm not sure even the second rerun dog, whether the stats for that would be of much interest, but it's there. And then again, when we'll send some more heat data in. Hey, wow, this one did happen to have 2 dogs rerun, so there we have the flag, and we will we'll record his heat results. And notice that when they get added, when the heats get added to the saved heats, they get color coded as well, depending on whether it was something bad and it gets red, or if it's easy, it gets colored yellow. So the idea is you can quickly scan through the saved heats and see who your troublesome dogs are for that particular day.